Hey everyone, I'm your host Adrian. We do content like this weekly, so hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified. If you want more content like this, click the like button and please leave a comment. Thanks again for watching. Welcome to today's Rupa University live class presented by Rupa Health, the simplest way to order specialty lab work. My name is Adrian Martinez and I will be your host for this afternoon. Today, we have a very, very special guest in Dr. Danny Meyersfeld with Dnalife here to discuss the practical application of nutrigenetic testing. Before jumping in, a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, everyone will be muted by default, but don't fret. If you do have any questions, please use that Q&A button in the menu bar at the bottom, and we'll host a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Immediately following the Q&A, yours truly will show you exactly how to order this test on Rupa Health. And if you have to jump early, no worries. We will be recording this and sending out a recording of the session along with the slides once our team has had the opportunity to edit it. Additionally, if you are a fan of this type of content, please be sure to check out rupahealth.com to get access to all the previous sessions that we have done. So with that, let's jump in. I'd like to introduce Dr. Danny Meyersfeld. After graduating with a PhD in molecular biology, Dr. Meyersfeld put his passion for genetics and medical research to great use by starting Dnalife biotechnology in 2007, at the time a pioneering company in the field of personalized medicine in South Africa. Dnalife partnered with Nordic Labs, very well known and leaders in the laboratory testing industry, to create Dnalife as part of their global testing rollout. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Meyersfeld. I'll let you take it over from here.
Thanks so much, Adrian, and thanks for the invitation to speak this evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. One or two disclaimers up front. The first is that we are in the midst of a power outage in Johannesburg, and so if the lights suddenly go off and my battery runs out, I do apologize in advance. I'm also forced to do the presentation from home rather than the office, meaning if you hear kids or dogs barking in the background, the kids will be crying, the dogs will be barking, not the other way around. Please forgive that as well, but I think that's something we all got a bit used to during the times of COVID. The second disclaimer, there's people who know me know that I'm generally a man of few words, and I firmly believe there's not much that can be said in an hour that can't be said in half an hour. So I'm not going to speak for the full hour this evening. What I'd love to do is rather tell you the journey of Dnalife, explain to you a little bit about our test offering, how we came about, some of the background, the nutrigenetics market that prompted us to start the company. And then I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to engage more during the Q&A and learn a little bit more about your experience with genetic tests. If you have any experience, what's maybe put you off from using genetic testing in the past, and how Dnalife can hopefully encourage you to move forward on your journey of working with genetics and moving into this exciting field of personalized medicine. So to begin with the story of Dnalife is largely a story of two individuals from opposite sides of the world who, with a chance meeting in Cape Town and a shared vision for the future of healthcare, happened to share a beer or two and realize just how much they had in common in terms of their vision. And I'll get back to that story a little bit later in the talk. But first, I want to take you back to where it all began for me, which was the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa, in the early 2000s, where, as Adrian mentioned, I did my PhD in molecular biology. And I realized towards the end of my PhD and during my postdoc that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life in academia. As much as I absolutely loved the research and I loved being in the lab, I knew that a career in academics was not for me. And I found myself immensely frustrated by the end of my studies. And what frustrated me was what I perceived to be an enormous research gap that existed between the knowledge that sits within the so-called ivory tower institutions, the academic or the research environments, and the lack of translation of that knowledge into something that can directly benefit the end user. So we sit with this wealth of information that sits in the literature, it sits in journal articles, it sits in the minds of academics and professors, but it takes a very, very long time, or it doesn't filter down to the end user. And so this is something that really frustrated me towards the end of my academic career. And the early 2000s was a fascinating time to be involved in the field of molecular biology. If you cast your mind back to the early 2000s, the draft of the human genome had been published in 2003. And it was really felt that this era of precision and personalized medicine was upon us. Talk of genomics and precision healthcare was everywhere you looked. And this new buzzword of nutrigenomics, personalized diets, it was jumped on very quickly by the diet and supplement industry. And this whole concept of direct-to-consumer testing absolutely exploded. And one of the advantages of being in South Africa is being a couple of years behind the rest of the world. You get to sit here and sort of watch what happens and observe how people respond and react to different offerings and how the field slowly advances. So what I noticed happening in these early 2000s was this parallel approach to the pursuit of precision genetics and to the pursuit of how we use the knowledge that was coming out from this Human Genome Project. Very much a conflict of the direct-to-consumer companies offering at-home genetic testing, very much looking at the pursuit of revenue, versus the academics and researchers holding on to the research, trying desperately to hold things back to say we don't know enough, and waiting really until we had all of the information and until what we knew was perfect. And I felt that there had to be some middle ground somewhere, because in both cases at the moment in the early 2000s, the loser is that health conscious consumer who wants to look after their health and potentially use genetics to enable them to do that. So the market at the time was replete with companies popping up left, right, and center, offering a whole host of genetic tests. The vast majority of these, not all of these, but the majority of these were offering direct-to-consumer tests where the test was bought online. The report would go straight back to the person who purchased it, and the report would make a whole bunch of claims around that person's health and provide a whole lot of information, some of it relevant and some of it not. And in my view, it was this direct-to-consumer approach to nutrigenetics in the early days that alienated doctors and probably, I believe, set the nutrigenetics testing field back about 10 years. The direct-to-consumer approach alienated doctors. I don't believe there was nearly enough effort to include the healthcare fraternity in these early days of testing, to encourage doctors to become educated in this new science, to utilize the knowledge of doctors, of allied health practitioners, to advance the field further. And so the tests themselves had very limited clinical value. They were often done outside of the clinical environment completely. A lot of the science on which those early tests were based was very dubious. Maybe there'd be claims made about things that had been published in a single study, not replicated, low impact journals, and these would be used as the basis for many of the claims that were in the report. And so a big so what factor arose around nutrigenetic tests. So you have your information, now what? You're told to eat more broccoli, so what? And so the whole field of nutrigenetics in the early days was very much on the back foot. There was a huge amount of criticism, and a lot of that criticism in retrospect was very much justified. I do feel that the issue was not the science of nutrigenetics so much as the application of the nutrigenetic science. What are some of the primary concerns around the tests in those early days? The first I've mentioned is that it was simply too soon. There was insufficient evidence behind the claims being made. In fairness, we still do receive some of that criticism today, but it primarily comes from those who, as I like to say, they confuse ignorance with a lack of evidence. There was a big and a valid concern that there was no value in the tests, again, primarily because these were done outside of a clinical environment. The clinicians not being involved limited the value of the test. And I still believe that direct-to-consumer genetic testing, even today with the wealth of information at our fingertips, has limited clinical value if it's done outside of the clinical environment. And the reason for this is because genetics is just one piece of the puzzle. To look at genetics in isolation means you're ignoring a whole host of lab assays or metrics or biochemical markers or family history, a whole lot of things that a clinician would otherwise have at their fingertips to utilize in combination with the genetics gets ignored. And so I really believe that a holistic approach means genetic tests need to be done within the clinical environment. There were also big ethical concerns in the early days, privacy concerns around the test results, the lack of any regulatory framework in which the tests should be conducted. Insurance concerns as to could the insurance companies use the results to load premiums, to prejudice you? Are you obliged to disclose results to your insurer? And that was raised a lot in the early days. Today, it's generally felt that the insurers are far more interested in those people who are likely to spend money on the tests than they are in the results of the test, because we know now that people who use these tests are more inclined to change their behavior and ultimately receive better health outcomes. And finally, there's the risk of misuse of the information. And by that, I mean, for example, talent identification using certain sports genes, telling somebody they can't be an elite endurance athlete because they don't have the right genetics, or making massive assumptions around their athletic ability based on a handful of markers. So there was certainly that potential for misuse of the information very much in the early days of the genetic testing. And so watching all of this unfold and having been in this environment of research, but also feeling frustrated about the speed with which the research translates, it was sort of caught between two extremes, because on the one hand, there was really good science that was at our fingertips that I felt should be used and could be used by the end user. On the other hand, the use of frivolous information and misleading claims that bastardized or extrapolized too much from the science purely for the purposes of profit was something that I was strongly opposed to. So I felt that there had to be a middle ground. And for me, the solution was a middle ground that entailed a practitioner-only approach, where we would upskill and educate healthcare practitioners and provide support for those practitioners to enable them to work with genetic tests in practice, to use the genetic information in order to get value and accurate, relevant, practical health information for their patients. It's only with the intervention of a genetic test that we can truly treat our patients as individuals. So a network of practitioners that is upskilled and educated on genetics is critical to the widespread rollout of genetic testing in the context of personalized and functional medicine. The SNPs that we choose have to be clinically relevant. There was a lot of noise at the time in the early days about the number of SNPs that were being looked at. So a test that looked at 500 SNPs versus a test that looked at 1,000 SNPs. Well, the bigger test had to be better. And really, it's not about the number of tests of SNPs that are included in the report. It's about the number of clinically relevant SNPs that are providing useful, actionable information to the practitioner that is important. Again, those SNPs have to be actionable. So these tests are not there to tell a patient that they have certain genetic risk factors, but there's nothing they can do with it. The purpose of a nutrigenetic test is to empower the end user to make changes in order to modify their disease risk. There have to be interventions available that the practitioner can use in order to encourage behavior change, in order to modify our gene expression, in order to get better health outcomes. The report, of course, the information needs to be presented in a way that is user-friendly, doctor-friendly. It can't be reams and reams of information that the doctor simply doesn't have time to go through in their practice. So color coding the reports or presenting the report in some other user-friendly manner becomes really important. And the reports need to be constantly updated because the science is continually evolving. We don't know everything. We still don't know everything. And we've been doing this for 15 years now. There is a huge amount to learn, but our test panels have evolved massively since the early days because we are constantly updating ourselves with the science and adding new markers into the tests as and when the science allows it. So the key is to be humble enough to acknowledge that we don't know everything, to put the resources into the research and development to ensure that our tests are constantly evolving and improving, and that our genetic test reports that we put out are a reflection of the most recent cutting-edge science that is available in the literature. And then, of course, the results need to be reliable. So who is the laboratory? How are they performing the assays? Can we trust the results? Can we send in split samples or duplicate samples to confirm the authenticity? Are they an accredited laboratory? What sort of quality control measures do they have in place? Anybody who tells you that laboratory testing is 100% accurate is lying. Mistakes do happen. The lab needs to have quality control measures in place to minimize the risk of error, to acknowledge those errors when they do happen, and to ultimately give you results that are reliable and not trustworthy. And so I'll take you back now to that chance meeting between myself, based in Johannesburg, and Chris Moore from Nordic Laboratories, based in Copenhagen. Chris came down to a conference in Cape Town in early, I think it was 2012 or so, an IFM conference that was held in Cape Town. And very quickly in chatting to each other, we realized how we shared a very similar vision for the future of healthcare. The concept of personalized medicine, the concept of upskilled and educated healthcare practitioners, of best in test, ensuring that practitioners can trust the test provider, can trust the laboratory, that the end user is ultimately empowered to make changes to their own personal health outcomes. These are all things that we spent hours speaking about, and very quickly it became apparent that there was a fantastic partnership to be had. Nordic Laboratories had an extensive track record in the functional medicine space, having been a broker of lab tests and provider of lab tests to functional medicine doctors all over the world for upwards of 15 or 20 years at the time when we met, now close to 30 years. And so by choosing to work with our tests, Nordic Laboratories immediately gave us a global platform that allowed us to take the tests we were developing in Johannesburg and make them available to doctors all over the world. So together as Dnalife, we've got combined 30 years of functional lab test experience. Practitioner education and support is very much at the core of what we do. We've got multiple tests designed to focus on key areas of patient health. All SNPs and all tests are selected on interpretive value. We've got a comprehensive portfolio of genetic and functional lab tests, which allows practitioners to implement this concept of test pairing that I've briefly mentioned earlier, where they are taking a more holistic approach to the care of their patients. Just to emphasize a little bit the SNP selection process that I mentioned earlier and the importance of how we choose the SNPs that go into the report. We've got a team that pretty much all day, every day is pouring through the literature, looking at the evidence behind various markers. And the way we choose our SNPs is we decide we're going to put a particular genetic panel together. Sometimes it's on request from an external partner. Sometimes it's something that we've had in the pipeline ourselves. After extensive peer review process, we limit the SNPs to those that fulfill these criteria, which is that the SNP needs to be relevant. It needs to be in a gene that's playing a role within an important biological process and needs to have a relevant role to play in that process. It needs to be prevalent in the population. There's no point in including a SNP in a test if that SNP is incredibly rare and it's never being identified. And the vast majority of SNPs will pick up will be at a minimum frequency of 10% for the variant allele. Crucially, the effect of that SNP needs to be modifiable. So we know that we can't change the DNA, but what we can do is we can modify the expression of the gene, or we can upregulate other genes in order to compensate for the gene or the pathway that is not functioning optimally, or the enzyme that is not functioning optimally. So there needs to be an intervention because we're looking to modify gene expression in order to ultimately affect the phenotype. And ideally, you want that intervention to be measurable. So you want to know that the intervention that you're putting in place that is having this modifying effect is measurable. And this way you can assess the efficacy of the intervention that you're providing. So that's the very extensive process and criteria that we go through when we put reports together. We do get requests a lot for various SNPs or various tests, and often purely in a laboratory role, we can run some of those SNPs. But when it comes to putting our brand or our interpretations or recommendations to a report, these are the criteria that we need to fill. And so where are we now? We've got 2 ISO accredited labs in Johannesburg and Helsinki that are processing approximately 2,000 reports every month. Our data reporting and protection is compliant with GDPR standards. We have software as service agreements with labs in USA, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Close to 100 personnel comprising research and development, support, sales, and lab teams. And that's in offices in Johannesburg, London, Copenhagen, and the Middle East. We have more than 5,000 healthcare practitioners globally that have completed training with us and are working with the DNA tests. A global support network of accredited healthcare practitioners whose role is to help onboard newly trained practitioners and assist in the onboarding and accreditation process to help with the comfort and confident levels of newly trained practitioners. And as I mentioned, constantly updated test reports in line with the latest research. And then to process all of this, we have our API-enabled reporting software, which generates PDF, JSON, and CSV files. And we've got our genetic reports available in up to 12 languages now. And so with that background to the company, I'm really excited to introduce you to our test portfolio, which will be available on the Rupa platform going forward. We started off 15 years ago with just the DNA Health and DNA Diet test. And I think between them, we were looking at perhaps 30 SNPs. And as the science has evolved and new partners have come on board, we've really taken the concept of nutrigenetics and are applying it across the spectrum to a vast array of specialties and healthcare practitioners in different areas. A lot of these tests are a little bit more niche or specialized and may be used, for example, just by those in the fertility space in the case of Grow Baby, or in the mental health space in the case of DNA Mind. But the benefit of the smaller individual panels is it allows practitioners to remain within their comfort zone, within their scope of practice, within their field of practice and field of interest. Based on feedback from a lot of doctors with tests that have combined all of these into a single report, they don't feel comfortable necessarily reporting back, if you're a psychologist, reporting back on the weight management around DNA diet. And so we've put these into separate test panels to ensure the comfort level and the scope of practice of the practitioners remains intact. I'm going to take you through the outline of just a few of these tests, just an overview of what some of them are about, and show just a little bit of how the information is presented. DNA Health is it's our flagship test that looks for genetic variations that are known to have a significant effect on health and susceptibility to chronic disease. So we're looking at key biological pathways such as methylation, detoxification, inflammation, insulin sensitivity, all of these that I'm sure are very, very familiar to all of you. These pathways that govern overall health and really help understand how genetic weaknesses in these pathways may increase predisposition to chronic diseases of lifestyle. As with all of our reports, these are low penetrance markers commonly found in the population, with interventions of diet, lifestyle, supplementation, or exercise having been shown to affect gene expression and modify the activity of these biological pathways. Just a snapshot of couple of pages of a sample report. So we show obviously the summary table with all of the genes that we cover, all of the genotype results, as well as an impact factor that we assign to that particular genotype. So we weight the genotypes based on the strength of the evidence, the effect of the SNP based on the prevailing literature. We assign an impact to that. And then we provide a priority table which scores the different genotypes across the areas in order to show the practitioner which are the high or moderate or low priority areas for that particular patient. So in this case, for example, you could very easily run your eye over the report and see that detoxification, bone health, and insulin sensitivity are coming out as being high priority. And that's obviously where the focus and the attention of the doctor should be placed. We then go into more detail on the different metabolic areas. We show a breakdown of the the genes and the impact factors, and then we give an explanation of each of these genes in the report. I haven't shown it here, but each of these genes is an explanation of what that particular gene does, what the effect is of the particular SNP we're looking at, and the effect of and your result, what the intervention is for your result. And finally, there's an overall report summary where we show just for the high priority areas what should or shouldn't be done. So things to do, things to avoid, in order to try and reduce risk to as great an extent as possible for those particular areas. Those practitioners who are not too comfortable with the genes themselves and might not want to get into too much detail on the biochemistry with their patients, this is a great summary that they can share with their patients, where it's very lay language. Any person could understand the kind of the do's and the don'ts, and it's all rather easy things to implement. DNA diet was the other sort of ancestral test that we had from the early days, as its name implies, very much geared around weight management. This is used extensively by dietitians around the world who are interested in the most suitable diet type for their patient. It's really the epitome of taking the guesswork out of dietetics or out of your weight loss journey. And one of our challenges with DNA diet was because of the extensive evidence that sits behind the test. We had to work really hard to differentiate this from a lot of the fad diets and fad claims that are in a sort of a saturated weight management or weight loss market. So, we get asked a lot of times about the science behind this test. And as with all of our tests, it really does stand up to scientific scrutiny when you look at the different genetic variations and how different people respond differently to different diet types. So here we're looking at risk for obesity, which helps to kind of manage expectations around weight loss and help not lose, help with compliance and not become disheartened if you're not losing weight as quickly as your friend or colleague who did the same diet. We look at responsiveness to saturated fats, to carbohydrates, requirement for exercise. Some people require exercise at a much higher intensity in order to lose weight, and they won't be as responsive to diet. We look at elements of eating behavior, such as snacking, as well as the predisposition for a sweet tooth. All of this information, which can help the dietitian to better manage the customized, personalized weight loss journey of the patient. The next test we put out was our DNA sport test. And there's a bit of a funny story. When we developed this test, my colleague at the time was doing a PhD with one of the experts in the genes of injury at the UCT in Cape Town. And because some of those genes were going to be included in the test, we thought we'd go and speak to him and let him know that we were putting this test out into the market, it's a commercial product, and we're including some of his genes in the test. And she went to chat with him and he said, look, it sounds great. Which genes are you looking at? And she mentioned COL1, COL5, and MMP. And he said, but those, we've known about those for ages. There's nothing new there. And that just reaffirmed my frustration that we'd known about them for ages, probably upwards of 10 years, those papers had been available. And yet there was nothing commercially available that coaches or physiotherapists or athletes could actually get some benefit from that information. So it just reinforced that frustration that I'd had about this knowledge gap between commerce and academia. So the DNA sport test can really be used by anybody, from the elite athletes to the recreational athlete, anybody who's looking to optimize the time they spend training, train according to their genetic potential or their genetic strengths. We're not looking to tell you what sport to play or whether you should be a long distance runner or a sprinter, but we can tell you to bring some sprint training into your long distance running if that is your chosen event. So it's really about optimizing the time that you spend training to get maximum benefit from that training time. Things like injury risk, things like how quickly you recover from high intensity exercise. And a massive problem with elite athletes especially is the risk of overtraining and not having sufficient recovery time between high intensity sessions. Endurance and power potential, as well as the peak training time based on circadian rhythm. So that's morning versus evening training. One of our newer tests, which is very much around mental health, is DNA Mind. We're looking at 30 gene variants involved in key biological pathways from serotonin and dopamine to inflammation and methylation that have been shown to have significant associations with mental health and provide insight into mood regulation, neurodegenerative disorders, and risks for addictive behavior. And this is something that, especially amongst our psychologist network and in combination with our pharmacogenetics MedCheck test, has proven incredibly insightful for doctors who are looking to gain that extra bit of diagnostic insight into helping to diagnose some of their patients. So it's not diagnostic. It's, again, low penetrance risk markers, but it can, in many cases, help to guide a diagnosis through the identification of those risk factors. So there we're looking at these three key areas of mood regulation, addictive behavior, and the risk for neurodegenerative disorders. And I mentioned MedCheck, which is our pharmacogenetics offering. And for me, MedCheck is by far the biggest no-brainer test for anybody who's on a chronic medication or looking to start a chronic medication. We're looking at insight into responsiveness to different medications and the likelihood of side effects and treatment failure. And it was only when I started doing the research before launching this test that I realized the extent of the global problem around treatment failure and adverse drug reactions. And the statistics are really quite frightening. How many people are taking chronic medications that they will potentially be on for the rest of their lives that are simply not working for them or giving them side effects that they're forced to put up with. So in an ideal world, you'd be getting people off most chronic medications, but certainly there's always a class of people who do require certain medical interventions. And to the extent that you can personalize those medications and minimize side effects, ensure maximum efficacy at the prescribed dosage, this test becomes very, very useful. So we're looking at well over 200 different prescription medications in the fields of psychiatry, pain, cardiovascular medications, and oncology. The vast amount of information that sits in this MedCheck report also sits in the product information leaflet in those prescription medications. So not sure how many doctors out there even read those product labels anymore, but there are well over 100 drugs that have FDA recommended guidance that includes the use of a pharmacogenetics test to help determine the optimal dose of the medication. We've built up a fan base over the past few years of esteemed medical practitioners who gave us their thoughts on using the test. I'm sure some of these names and faces are familiar to you. Dr. Todd Lapine is a faculty member of A4M and leading expert in functional medicine. He loves our DNA Mind and DNA Health test especially. He loves the fact that we only have the clinically relevant SNPs, the actionable SNPs in them. So in terms of sifting through the report, ascertaining what interventions are most relevant, we've done the hard work for the doctors. Dr. Sly Nedic in South Africa is a board-certified physician in anti-aging medicine, and she primarily uses DNA skin in her aesthetic patients. Sahar Swidden is the head of education for A4M, considers MedCheck a must-have tool for the patients. Information provided is critical for proper medication selection. And Dr. Mark Hyman, who I'm sure needs no introduction, is the MD Director of Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. He considers the DNA Health test a great option to optimize your health based on your genetics. The one thing we've done over the past few years, as we've expanded out of our comfort zone of our own internal experts, is to work with collaborating partners to develop new panels. And the idea behind these new panels is to make nutrigenetic testing available and relevant to a much broader and diverse array of healthcare practitioners. So I think in the early days of nutrigenetics, as it moved into the medical space, it's fair to say that it was largely dietitians and functional medicine doctors who embraced the field, dietitians, nutritionists, some of the allied practitioners. Now we're seeing more and more medical specialties from all over who are all over different specialties who are starting to find relevance for these tests in their practice. And so some of the collaborators we've worked with include Richard Sutton, who's a performance coach and well-published author of The Stress Code and Stress Proof, the Game Plan. Richard's done extensive work on the genes behind the biochemistry of resilience and stress management. And so we worked very closely with him to develop the DNA Resilience Panel. Dr. Leslie Stone and Emily Ridbom from Grow Baby in the United States have worked with maternal and fetal health for the past 20 odd years, delivering thousands of babies in that time and ensuring optimal health for mom and fetus. And they approached us, I think it was about 3 years ago, prior to COVID, with a view to developing a Grow Baby genetic test that specifically targets optimal nutrition for the mom-to-be or pregnant mom to ensure best outcomes for mom and fetus. And I'll take you a little bit more into that test just now. And then part of our product pipeline include DNA Pain, which we develop in collaboration with the NewPath chain of pain clinics all over Canada, as well as the DNA Risk Breast Cancer Report, which is a polygenic risk score for breast cancer that we're developing in collaboration with INSERM in France. So just a little bit more on these pipeline products. DNA Resilience is genetic test looking for individuals looking to cope better under stressful or demanding conditions. Really what it's about is stress management, how we all respond differently to different stress interventions based on the different biochemistry and based on how our resilience genes are contributing towards our stress management. So we're looking to help enhance mental, emotional, and physical health and inform lifestyle strategies that enable you to overcome stress and excel in everyday life. I've got a sample from the report as well here to show you the different biological areas that are being considered. So the seven areas or the 7 pathways that govern stress, being your neuropeptide Y, oxytocin, BDNF, stress axis, norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. We look at the genetics behind all of these pathways, and we tell you the extent to which those particular pathways are able to contribute towards your resilience. Then for those where the contribution is not good, we're able to provide interventions based on diet, exercise, lifestyle, and supplementation in order to promote those pathways and ensure their better contribution towards your stress management. Grow Baby is very much a test geared towards a pregnant mom who's looking to ensure best outcomes for herself as well as for the developing baby. So it considers 3 different areas: birth phenotypes, birth outcomes, and birth conditions. Birth phenotypes, we're looking at risks for being small for gestational age or large for gestational age. We're looking at risk for preterm birth as well as stress dysregulation phenotype. Some of the birth outcomes that we consider are gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, gestational hypertension, risk for miscarriage and recurrent pregnancy loss, and birth conditions we consider are, for example, neural tube defects. Again, this is not an NIPT test. This is not high penetrance genetic testing. We're looking at modifiable risk factors where we're giving the mom the power to intervene with nutrition in order to manage preemptively any of these low penetrance genetic risk factors that we might identify. The development pipeline, I mentioned breast cancer report and DNA Pain. We also, in the coming months, will be putting out a supplementary report that will go along with all of our Nutrigenetic offerings, which is a nutraceutical recommendations guide. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on those as well. So the breast cancer report, DNA Risk Breast Cancer Report, is a polygenic risk score that considers genetic risk, modifiable risk factors, as well as non-modifiable risk factors to determine the risk for a sporadic or spontaneous breast cancer. The vast majority of breast cancers are spontaneous. Those due to the high penetrance BRCA genes only make up 5 to 10% of all breast cancer cases. So the vast majority of breast cancers are a combination of diet, lifestyle, and genetics that ultimately determine your cancer risk. So some of the things that we consider, there's approximately 300 genetic markers that are being considered. We're looking at non-modifiable risk factors such as age at menarche, and height comes into it as well as modifiable risk factors such as smoking, alcohol consumption, hormone use, age of first pregnancy, and BMI. And then your genes, your diet, your exercise, plus regular risk screening can all work together to minimize personal breast cancer risk. The goal for this test is to encourage regular screening for those at high risk of breast cancer or higher risk. And then DNA pain is the last test that I'll go through. It's a genetic test that offers insight into pathways that influence chronic pain and comorbid conditions. Again, offering personalized diet, nutraceutical, exercise, and lifestyle recommendations for improved chronic pain management. So we're looking at areas of sustainable pain management, managing the risk of anxiety and depression that often come with chronic pain, lifestyle and exercise requirements, dietary recommendations, and of course, nutraceuticals and medications as required. And to make the clinical utility of these tests that much more relevant, to make the clinical application for the doctors that much easier, we'll soon be adding on a nutritional supplement recommendations report, which based on the specific tests that you've had done, will collate all the information across all of the different genetic reports to provide a summary of nutrient recommendations for that particular patient, as well as product options and various suppliers for those products. So, obviously dosing of those products would be at the discretion of the doctor, but we'd certainly be recommending the nutrients and certain products as being the most suitable or highest quality of the ones that of which we were aware. So in summary, our genetic testing portfolio really covers the spectrum of health, whether it's gut health, mental health, skin aging, blood clotting, any aspect of health that you're likely to see in your practice. There will be a genetic test from Dnalife that can give insight, can add value, can enhance your ability to manage your patient and your patient's risks in the best possible way. So nutrigenetic testing has become an integral part of any preventive medicine practice. The education and training of practitioners is key to the successful implementation of testing in practice. The availability of these niche test panels from Dnalife allows healthcare practitioners to remain within their scope of practice, as well as their comfort zone. Genotype-specific supplement recommendations as an addendum to the Dnalife reports simplifies the practical implementation of the report guidelines. There's a massively increased consumer awareness of and demand for genetic tests. And this places the burden of responsibility more and more on the healthcare practitioner to become upskilled in this area in order to differentiate the good tests from the bad, the valuable from the irrelevant, and the practitioner versions from direct to consumer. And the Dnalife advantage, we're leaders in the field of functional lab tests with more than 30 years combined experience. We have online and in-person education seminars frequently held throughout the year and around the world. We're a truly global organization with reports in multiple languages. Strong development pipeline ensures the constant enhancement and evolution of test panels. Our in-house laboratories help prioritize turnaround time, quality control, and reporting standards. Our average reporting time from receiving the sample to returning the result is 7 days. The Nordic clinic infrastructure provides a feedback loop between clinicians and test developers. So as part of Nordic Laboratories, the Nordic group, they've got a group of clinics scattered throughout Scandinavia. I think it's 12 clinics between Scandinavia and Portugal, with top functional medicine practitioners in these clinics working constantly with all of the tests, all of the functional tests that you'll come across. And this close contact that we have with these clinicians who are at the coalface of functional medicine and applying it in practice allows us to constantly ensure that the tests we develop are the ones that are relevant and practical for those doctors. And finally, as I said earlier, genetics is but one small piece of the puzzle. And I think as a genetic testing company, we're one of the few who would admit that. But we firmly believe that the add-on value of functional laboratory tests, biochemistry tests, talking to the patient, and all the information you're going to get from the patient, all of these need to be looked at together. And the genetics, whilst important, it's simply a piece of the puzzle that adds additional value. Our commitment going forward is to take a central role in helping to change healthcare by supporting the growth of personalized medicine globally, by educating and supporting clinicians and their patients, continuing to collaborate with research institutions to advance test development, engaging with medical and political bodies, and delivering the tools of personalized medicine to the market. To contact us, our website, dnalife.healthcare. If you follow the education tab, you'll find information about the Dnalife certification courses. And I'll just draw your attention to the current early bird special that we have for that training. It's priced at $4.99 for the 3-day training. The next one is being held in Charleston in South Carolina. That's from the 5th to the 7th of August. And that price is reduced from $7.99 to $4.99. And that $4.99 test price includes all six Nutrigenetic tests. And with that, I'll say thank you again for joining us and for your time this evening, and to Adrian for organizing. And I'm really happy to take any of your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Meyersfeld. Something about genetics. I love this topic. And there's just so much comprehensive testing that Dnalife provides. So we got some amazing questions that came in. And just so everybody's aware, we're going to host a quick Q&A. Immediately following the Q&A, I'm going to show everyone exactly how to order every one of the tests that Dr. Meyersfeld mentioned during his presentation directly from Rupa Health. So the first question that we got is, are these tests only for adults?
No, definitely not. Your genes don't change. And in many cases, the sooner you do these tests, the better. You know, we've had so many cases with I guess, sport is a prime example, where we'll test an elite athlete maybe for PR purpose or something like that. And the response is, I wish I'd known 20 years ago what you're telling me now. Yeah. Because a lot of the time, if you're in tune with your body and you're training hard and you're trying different training methods, you will ultimately work out what works best for you. But the idea of the genetic test is to skip that trial and error process. So really, in many cases, the sooner you do the test, the better. And it's certainly not only for adults.
Okay, that's awesome. So you can test someone at any stage within their life.
Correct.
That's amazing. So are these just, or rather just beyond testing, is there an extensive questionnaire, or are the suggestions and evaluations just purely based on the samples that you're collecting?
Yeah, the evaluations that we provide in the report are based purely on the genetics. Wow. So where the additional information will come from in terms of a questionnaire that we could otherwise collect would be from the clinician taking that information from their patient and collating it with the genetic results that we provide.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So quick question, do you have a copy of a sample report that you'd be able to show us, or an example of one?
Absolutely. If you give me 1 second, I'll pick it up and I'll share my screen again.
Sure. And again, for anybody who does have to jump early, we are recording this session, and we'll go ahead and send it out once we've had the opportunity to do some edits to the video within the next coming days here. So again, we appreciate you all hopping on and joining us today.
Okay, so this is an example of our DNA health sample report. I did show a little bit of it in the talk. Can you see my screen, Adrian?
Yep.
Okay, great. So just an explanation, the impact factors, we've got low, moderate, high impact, and in some cases beneficial. In some cases, there are certain gene variants that are beneficial to the patient. Then we go into the different biological areas that are covered. So lipid metabolism, methylation, detoxification, inflammation, oxidative stress, bone health, and insulin sensitivity are all covered in the DNA health report. And the priority column is based on the scoring of the different genotypes that come up in the testing.
That's awesome.
We then have the report summary, which just highlights the 3 high priority areas: detox, bone health, and insulin sensitivity, with a little explanation of what that process is, as well as some of the do's and don'ts associated with detoxification. So reduce exposure to environmental toxins such as cigarette smoke, smoked foods, air pollution, pesticides, and plastic. That type of consumer-friendly information that anybody can print out this page and keep it with them.
Wow.
We also report on food responsiveness, and in this case, the person's come out with gluten intolerance as being a high priority as well. And then the other area covered in the DNA health report is vitamin requirements, vitamin metabolism. So high priority or increased requirement for vitamin D, vitamin B12, and vitamin C. With under the what should I do, we're looking at sources of these vitamins. So foods such as fatty fish, liver, egg yolks, ensure adequate sun exposure. That's the type of information in the report, as well as considering whatever supplements might be recommended either in the report or through the doctor.
That's amazing. It's always amazing how much of just everything comes back to genetics, and what we're able to do with that now. So the next question I have is,
I think it's amazing how much comes back to genetics, but I also think it's amazing how much of it is in our own hands, and how much it's not just genetics, but it's genetics and the environment in which we place those
how they're
genes
expressed. Yeah.
And I think that's where the mindset around genetic testing has changed so much. Is we used to think that genetic test was, it's looking at your risk, it's the cards that you've been dealt, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And now we see genetic test as something that is so empowering, because we're getting all this information, we're learning about all these risks that we have, and make no mistake, those risks are there whether we know about them or not. The difference is, if we know about them, we're able to do something about it. And that's the key aspect of nutrigenetic testing, is the ability to act on this information and intervene in a positive way to affect your health.
Yeah, I love that. It always gets me very hyped up. It's awesome just how much control we can actually have over it. Would you mind going a little bit deeper into what the certification process would look like? We have a lot of practitioners that are joining us that are interested in implementing some of these tests, but don't necessarily know where to start or how to get certified, and what that process would look like once they place the order, and what kind of guidance they might have once they get the results in for their patients.
Yeah. So with the test being available on Rupa, obviously any clinician can go and order the test. We highly recommend that the clinicians do the certification, either the online training, which is available all the time, or the in-person sessions, which are held every few months. So as I mentioned, the next in-person one is in South Carolina in August. More information on our website, which is dnalife.healthcare.
Nice.
And that is a 3-day training held by 2 functional medicine doctors, Mark and Michelle Sherwood, who've been working with our tests and training on our tests for many, many years now. They're incredibly dynamic and enthusiastic, and you couldn't ask for a better 3 days from an education perspective than to listen to those 2 doctors talking about genetics. It's really, we receive unbelievable reviews on those 3 days of training. The alternative, if you can't get to the in-person training, we do have online training available as well. The way that works is we'll take in a cohort of people approximately a month before our online live sessions. So we give about 3 to 4 weeks time for self-study, and then we have live sessions every 3 months. And the live sessions are largely to discuss case studies, Q&A. Ideally, we want people coming to those live sessions who've done a lot of the groundwork and the background work themselves. So the next live sessions are the middle of June. There is still enough time to register for those online training sessions, and to get through certainly a fair amount of the background material before the next live sessions.
Nice. Yeah, so there's a ton of just options available for practitioners interested to be able to learn and
then also, like I was saying, we do have a clinical support team available. So there's no better way of learning these tests than to do your own.
Yep.
Any practitioner who's looking to do the training, I'd highly recommend you do your own tests. You let our team of experts take you through those results. You then do the training. There's a certain barrier in terms of comfort levels for a lot of practitioners that you don't feel confident initially to work with it. We're happy to take you through your first patient reports before you meet with your patient, in order to help you extract those key messages that's going to give value to your patient.
Wow, that's huge. Is there a cost to, I'm assuming there's a cost to the in-person one, but is there a cost to the online certifications?
There is a cost, but that includes the tests.
Amazing.
And if you give me 1 second, I'm going to look up the cost of that online training, because I actually don't have it offhand.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yeah, super important questions. And what's great is these are all questions that people are interested. I think the future of genetics is so interesting.
And just to mention, we also have, for those who are interested in the more niche tests, for example, just the Grow Baby or just the Resilience, we have those as their own training. So you don't have to do the entire training if you prefer not to. The cost of the single test training is $163.
Okay, perfect. So the next question we have here is, if a patient had breast cancer, probably any cancer, and is in remission, will the DNA risk test be advisable?
No, it's probably a bit late to do it, because if we come out as being high risk, they're not going to do anything different. And if we come out as low risk, there's a problem with the test. You know, the cancer could be due to any number of reasons. It could be high penetrance markers. It could be a BRCA, for example. I would say if they really are aware of their breast cancer risk, having had a previous cancer, they should be doing everything to avoid a recurrence. And so there wouldn't be any point in looking at a general screening risk test at that point.
Yep. Similar type question, bit of a scenario. Can a woman who's not yet pregnant utilize the Grow Baby test?
Interestingly enough, yes. What the Stones have found in their work is that intervening nutritionally pre-conception, up to as far as the second trimester, you can still affect the health outcomes of the developing fetus. So it's absolutely not only for pregnant women, also for women looking to get pregnant. And there's some advantages, believe it or not, to the man doing the test as well. Yep. So it's not simply for pregnant women.
Yeah, I personally want to do all of these tests on myself. So last question we have here is, are the results shared with any other third parties outside of yourself?
No, not at all. The results are shared with the healthcare practitioner, and that is it.
Amazing.
We don't use the results for research. We're not anonymizing the data for anything else. It's simply shared with the referring doctor.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. So Dr. Meyersfeld, any last shout outs or thoughts that you want to share with us?
No, I think I said everything. Like I said at the beginning, I'm generally a man of few words. I can't believe I went on for so long. So again,
it was getting to the 45-minute point. I was like, he's still going. This is great.
So I guess just thanks to everyone who joined this evening. I hope you got what you were looking for from the talk. I hope you learned something about our test and our offering, and you know the name Dnalife is one that will be familiar to you going forward.
Yep.
And really, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.
Amazing. Dr. Meyersfeld, thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who have some time, I know we're at the hour right now. I'd love for you to stick around and see exactly how we can order all of these tests that Dr. Meyersfeld just mentioned during his amazing presentation. So with that, I'm going to do a quick transition, and I'm going to share my screen and talk to you about Rupa Health and who we are, what we do, and again, how you can get access to not only the test that was spoken about, or the tests rather that were spoken about during today's session, but also the opportunity to order from over 25 different labs, over 3,000 different tests, all in one place from Rupa Health. So if this is your first time joining one of our sessions, I'm sure you might be curious as to who we are, who I am. My name is Adrian Martinez. I'm the head of practitioner partnerships here at Rupa Health. And so what a big part of my role is here is to help coordinate these live classes to provide education to practitioners who might be interested in using and leveraging some of the labs that we partnered with. What is Rupa Health? Well, we're a platform that's designed to make it easier to track and manage and basically operate in the world of lab testing. So what we've done to make life easier for you as a practitioner is we've aggregated over 25 different labs, over 3,000 different tests in one place, including, of course, Dnalife. So things such as IU Metrics, Boston Heart, Dutch, Genova, Great Plains, you name it. Again, over 25 different labs, over 3,000 different tests, all in one place. So now, as opposed to having to go and start different accounts with each one of these labs to go and place your orders and manage your results, you come to Rupa Health and you get everything all at your fingertips. Additionally, not only can you order all your tests in one place, but you can track and manage all of your results. So once you place that order, you can see when the results arrived at the lab, when you can expect the results to come in, or samples arrived at the lab, results to come in. Again, the idea here is an efficiency play. Everything all at your fingertips in one single marketplace. Just to show you how simple it is to place an order on Rupa Health, I'm going to click this button that says Start an Order. We just need the patient's first name, last name, and email address. We collect everything else directly from the patients to complete the order, and it makes life easier for you because you don't have to know all of their demographic or shipping information. We collect that all straight from the patient. So the order screen is split up into 3 different sections. We have our bundles up at the top, so I can create custom bundles, which are sets of tests, sets of blood panels from any one of the labs that we work with. That way it's just one click, and all the tests that I'm looking to add will be added into my cart straight away. Right? The idea here, again, you don't have to search through the whole catalog to add 10 different tests that you're looking to add. Below that, you can create a favorites list. So your favorites list is composed and comprised of individual tests that you commonly order. So again, the idea here is you don't have to search through a whole catalog. If you're trying to order from Dutch, Genova, Dnalife, any lab, they're all just right here. And so if I want to order a Dnalife Mind and a Dnalife Skin and Sport, they're all at my fingertips here. I can even order a combo and 10 different tests from Dnalife, the whole combination of all those tests, again, all at my fingertips. The best part about it is that we charge the same wholesale practitioner price that you would get having an account directly with the labs that here at Rupa Health. So there's no upcharge from the cost of the tests. You simply select whatever test that you want to order. Let's say I want to order that combo test and I want to order a Great Plains oats test. Boom, boom. And if anything, it's as simple as clicking send to patient. Of course, there's some customizations that I can do, such as scheduling a test out in advance. I have the add-on tests here. If there's any coupons that you have that you're working with, we can add those, assuming that they work within our system. Additionally, it'll have the patient pay for the order. Most of the practitioners that we work with prefer to just have us manage billing directly with the patient. It's the same exact cost. And also we offer multiple different payment solutions to the patients beyond just cash and credit. We can do HSA, we can do FSA, and we can even set up a 3-month interest-free payment plan with the patient. You can add notes for the patient, notes for Rupa. You can add ICD-10 codes as well. So we don't offer or accept insurance directly through Rupa. But what we can do is have you add some ICD codes to your order. We'll go ahead and send a template over to the patient, walk them through how to generate that super bill and submit for potential reimbursement. Now, I'm sure you're curious, hey, Adrian, how does Rupa make their money? I'm sure this isn't free. And you're right, Rupa isn't free. We do charge the same wholesale practitioner prices that you would get directly from the labs. But the way that we generate our revenue is there's a flat 7% processing ordering fee on each order. So as you can see in this case, it's about $1,000 worth of tests. $75 is going to be that processing and ordering fee. Beyond that, Rupa is a free account to sign up for. There's no sign up cost. There's no subscription cost, none of that. And then it's as simple as clicking send to patient. Now, the last couple of things I want to show you is what happens once you send that order to the patient, because that is so important, right? A lot of the pain points that I hear on a daily basis from our practitioners have to do with the time that it takes to walk the patients through how to submit these orders and send their samples to the labs. If there's a specimen issue, price transparency, or just getting these patients to be able to afford these tests, right? They're very expensive. So Rupa's designed an end-to-end patient solution to help with this. So as soon as you place that order through Rupa, we can effectively take it from there. As I mentioned previously, we will bill the patient directly, or of course you have the option of paying for the test yourself and billing the patient outside of our platform. But if you allow us to bill the patient directly, we can take multiple different payment options. We can accept credit, debit, HSA, FSA, as well as a payment plan. Here's what it all looks like. So we'll, again, alert the patient. We'll collect all the necessary information to complete the order. We'll alert them as to what the cost of the tests were and, of course, what the tests are. If you decide to pay for the order, nothing changes in terms of the patient experience. The only difference here is that the patients will not see the cost of the tests. From there, we'll notify the patient once the order has been shipped out, and we will send over an email that looks similar to this. So we will send over an email that outlines all the instructions and FAQs, oftentimes videos for a lot of the tests that we take. We'll walk the patient through how to fill out the requisition forms. Additionally, if there's a blood draw required, we will walk and coordinate that directly with the patient. We can either customize that information. So if you're lucky enough to have a phlebotomist in-house or know one that you want to recommend, we'll take that information and send that to the patient. Otherwise, we will go ahead and send over options based on the lab that they're working with. But let's say that your patient wants a mobile phlebotomist to come to their house and draw their blood. They can reach out to our team and we will facilitate and search by zip code to send over any additional options that we have within that area. If your patient has any support questions, they'll reach out to us and our team. So essentially, we will manage the entire patient support experience when it comes to these labs. Even specimen issues. If there's an issue with the specimen, we will coordinate that directly with the patient in the lab. You'll be alerted, of course, so you'll be able to be in the know, but there's no steps that you have to take. We will coordinate that directly with the patient for any redraws and, of course, handle any additional costs and expenses associated with that. From there, we'll follow up with the patient. We'll make sure that they don't have any questions, and if they do have questions, we'll get that answered. And then you are alerted as the results come in. So what we're seeing here at Rupa is what the process that we've created with everything involved has resulted in over 85% compliance rates. So our compliance rates are very high here at Rupa Health, which is amazing. So that really is at its core, Rupa Health the product that you would use on a day-to-day basis. But a couple things, and the last thing that I really want to call out, I'm actually going to give you guys a quick little sneak peek. It's called Rupa University. You're all actually a part of Rupa University. It's here in your tab. But Rupa University is the opportunity for you to learn and get access to education about functional medicine. So the live class that you're all part of right now is a part of Rupa University. We actually have live classes on a weekly basis where we invite practitioners to come in and speak about topics that are very important. Next week, Dr. Carrie Jones is actually going to be doing a Rupa Health Masterclass. So if you do have any questions for that, I highly recommend signing up for the Rupa Health Masterclass because she will walk through everything. But even beyond just free classes, we have boot camps. Boot camps are generally a multi-week boot camp where you have the opportunity to deep dive into tests. So for example, the Dutch test or the GI map, and you'll be able to learn from people like not only Carrie Jones, but also Dr. Dan Kalish. And there's a lot more awesome opportunities that we're going to be seeing with some big name partners that you'll see down the pipeline. I can't say too much yet. But again, Rupa University is an educational component to Rupa Health that is so important. We see such a need from our practitioners to want to be learning about the ever fast-pacing, fast-changing landscape of functional medicine, and Rupa University is one of the ways that we're providing this opportunity to practitioners for free, or there's also paid options. So with that, y'all, my name is Adrian Martinez. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Here's my contact information. It's just adrian@rupahealth.com, and this is my direct phone number. So I appreciate you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week at that Rupa Health Masterclass and for classes beyond that. So again, thank you so much for your time and sticking around. If you have any questions, please reach out directly to me here. Have a great rest of your day.